Okay, the recording has started. Today is April 21st, and it is the mock meeting. The first item on our agenda is about changing the mock name. It's currently Manufacturing Oversight Committee. Somebody in the community, BFG Neil, had also suggested possibly doing the Manufacturer Compliance Committee. And I feel like this might be a good option to kind of suggest. Basically, we're kind of trying to find some sort of name that gives the convey that the committee is for compliance of radio, blockchain security, and the ethics stock that the manufacturers are held to. So we can start the discussion there.
Manufacturers Technical Compliance Committee.
Let's try to put as many letters as we can so no one can pronounce it.
I mean, it can still be called mock. And
okay.
Change what it is.
The O is.
I mean, we could just.
I think we're all definitely in favor of it. I think that's sort of like, can we come up with and vote the new idea now, or do we think it's going to take more thought? What are people's opinions on that? Happy to hash through either one.
Maybe just for clarification, maybe somebody can summarize what the concern is about the current name in terms of the way it's interpreted by the community and the manufacturers, right? So maybe
this might be something I have expertise in for a change. as the resident knucklehead. So I think the problem that we're coming to is that we're seeing that a lot of people see the mock as having oversight over the entire ecosystem, over all of Helium. And that because we have that name, we should have the ability to reach down from the ether and turn off any gateway or to control any part of the system or to have oversight and really overwatch into it. And I think the intent, as I understand it, is to make sure that even though the mandate and the control that the MOC as currently named has won't change, that the name itself will help the average person like me coming in see that, okay, this isn't an all-powerful committee. It's just, it's one gateway on the step to a manufacturer onboarding onto the chain. And that may be a step too far, because I think most people don't understand how that works.
Yeah, I would just add that we are not like the good housekeeping seal of approval for products. Like it's outside of our mandate. We aside from looking at kind of this minimum set of blockchain, authentication security capability and minimum level of RF, just demonstrating that the manufacturer at least did get a certification in the country that they want to sell into. The committee does not have a mandate to do anything beyond that, and we're definitely not endorsing specific products or have completely tested the user experience around products or the mobile apps. So it's really, I think clarifying the scope of the committee's responsibility, and making sure that the Helium community is aware that they're empowered consumers and they need to really use that and make good research decisions.
Yeah, and maybe we call it the Minimal Oversight Committee. Yeah. It remains the mock.
Yeah, I mean, can these things be accomplished in a name change? I think possibly, but that may be really accenting why the words really need to inspire joy about what we really do.
Yeah, I think that this technical part, I mean, manufacturer, I don't know, was it technical compliance, as many letters and words as that is, that seems to really neck down what it is, so that even the average person coming in who's buying a hotspot reading it says like, oh, that's like a compliance thing. Like they're not in charge of the entire blockchain.
Or the products.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm getting t-shirts made up with mock on it. So I don't care if it's 4 letters or 9 letters or whatever. But yeah.
Everyone, I just brought in Lewis for something later on. I just put in the notes. It's just an update, something we should all be aware of. So carry on in our current discussion.
We also have that LBT thing.
Yeah, he might be able to speak to that too.
So now you have to stay the whole meeting, Lewis.
I mean, I was a fan of the word security being in there, but of course that's my personal bias about what I like. I think compliance is a little bit better.
So Jeremy, help me understand the security side. Like, what do we do that has to do with security? I think that's,
yeah. So what do we do that has to do with security? We ultimately tell the blockchain team what keys can be onboarded or not onto the blockchain, which ultimately is there to bolster the proof of security algorithm in the blockchain, which is our main proof of something thing that makes the blockchain work. So one of our mandates, one of the things that we do here is we vet manufacturers, whether we trust them with that privilege, because ultimately the hotspots they onboard get rewards. They get to participate in proof of coverage. And if we don't believe the manufacturer's capable of doing that, or we think they're going to try to work around that and sell hotspots just to game the system, that we're one of the gatekeepers for that function. And that's what the community trusts us to do. Of course, we have extended and flexed our muscles in that way in the past. So that's the security aspect of it.
What about manufacturer gatekeeper committee then?
Let me. I just want to add something, because I think Jeremy was absolutely correct, but also it's a little bit more, Jeremy, in that this committee does look at the method, the hardware design software method that the manufacturer does use to protect the keys on these designs. Like the ECC 608 is the most common, but there's others, and I think that is one of the core functions that this committee does do. Like if somebody wants to use a new security key generation and storage method, it has to be approved by this committee. So I like security, I like technical, I like compliance. Can we just put them all together and just be?
What about manufacturer assessment committee?
I'm working on it.
I think assessment probably makes it sound still like too much customer service.
I also worry about assessment, not even from the customer service, but that it sounds like it's a one and done. And as you've seen, we will continue to look after manufacturers, at least on the parts that we feel that we're comfortable overseeing, even after they've been assessed, right? So
we can put them all together, Brad. The MTSCC, like the Manufacturer Technical Security Compliance Committee. Or
There you go.
I'm writing here. I'm trying to rearrange these letters. I'm on MSCEC. Sounds like
I think there's some websites where you can go put the letters in.
Yeah, we could turn it into a Wordle game.
Oh, will it give us like a logo too?
We need some vowels. Yeah, man, on the security side, like I get it, but man, I think we open ourselves up for misunderstanding pretty quickly there.
I like the compliance. I think it's easy, right? I mean,
I think simpler is, I think simpler is better. I think compliance is a good word to put in there because it has an overview of everything. I think if we get too many letters, it's just going to be way too long.
But it reduces the scope from oversight, which implies a very broad mandate and very like back to the original description by Nick, right? So I like compliance better than oversight.
Yeah, if we can't get agreement on anything, it sounds like compliance is where we're heading towards for.
So MCC, Manufacturer Compliance Committee.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? We could change it again later.
We could also adjourn that conversation to the channel and continue talking about it.
Yeah. It sounds like we have some momentum here.
It is making a song in my head.
Yeah, you down with MCC? Yeah, you know me.
You have to be from the 90s.
Well, that's all that's all the intellectual property I can contribute at this point.
Yeah, you and me. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, well, since we got a lot of other things to do, it sounds like that's where we're headed, and we'll do the official vote in the channel. Is everyone okay with that?
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Now we've got Lewis here. Lewis, there's two things on here. You had something specifically you just want to remind us about Australia, how that's going, and if you can delve into the LBT requirements that you feel that the committee should be pushing.
Yeah. The LBT topic's a lot quicker, so I'll start with that. Basically, I forget which vendor, but there was a vendor that pointed out that the Helium packet forwarder example, so on GitHub, Helium /SX1302 HAL, does not have the most recent features that Semtech released, which includes LBT. So first of all, I clarified with the vendor, and I wanted to make sure that you guys, when you're engaging with vendors, that you explain that the packet forwarder that under Helium on GitHub is not a required packet forwarder. It is just an example. And secondly, maybe express and make sure that they have understood that it doesn't support LBT if they are in an LBT region. They need to be using the most recent one released from Semtech. I hope that we can get ours rebased and updated soon, but I just wanted to flag this, as it is right now, and make sure everyone's aware of that.
There's actually two issues. You need to A, have the right HAL, B, you need to have a specific part or a radio populated on your gateway card. And I'm not sure if all manufacturers populate that 1261 by default.
Yeah, that's really critical, Patrick. The majority of the 1302 radio cards that are out circulating have chosen to depopulate this secondary radio, which is required for the simple 4 talk. So, and that's because it's not really required in the United States or Europe. But if you're going into an LBT region like South Korea, you absolutely have to have a radio card that populates the 1261, I believe.
Yes.
And so it's 2 parts. The packet forwarder has to be upgraded, and you have to have a special concentrator. And this is, listen before talk is required for LoRaWAN compatibility in these regions where it is required.
Japan, South Korea, those are the only one I know off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was on people's minds. And it might be, I think there's now been established some really nice documentation of things that to check for different people and what they're doing. So under certifications, I would definitely, are you trying to sell in an LBT region? Do you have the 1261? Do you have the most recent packet forwarder? I think would be good things to put in a checkbox.
So it'd probably be just along that line. It'd probably be good. I don't know if we explicitly ask what channel plans. We ask what countries the manufacturers are going into on their application, but we should probably have them start to say, "Hey, these are the LoRaWAN channel plans I plan to support." Most of the time, it does. Most of them are compatible hardware-wise, but that would be an easy way to spike out if they think they're going into an LBT region.
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue to another thing I just wanted to mention and make sure you guys are aware of. So back in September, when we initially tried to roll out AS9231 in Australia and New Zealand, we realized that there's a lot more pushback than we knew about. So we stopped at that moment, the LoRaWAN committee, that is. And one of the things I think was communicated to quite a bit of vendors trying to ship to Australia and New Zealand was the current plan is AU915, but we think that you should be trying to make sure that you're certified for AS9231 as well. And I did a quick survey around February, and I saw that I think at least 90%, basically everyone I asked said that they did indeed dual certify from with the local regulations on the radio side, that they could operate as an AS9231 or AU915 device. And so that was great. And it gave us that flexibility to start looking at options there on the channel plan side. So I just wanted to, and so with as we've worked through that suggestion with the community, and we've seen that there's a lot of people that have AU915 out, have plans to roll out AU915, that were really against an AS9231 change that would leave them basically not able to operate. We did some more analysis, and we realized that we could create a frequency plan or listen channels on a gateway that was compatible with both frequency plans. So that's something we're developing and working through and making sure that the practice and the implementation holds up against the theory there. So I just wanted to, I guess, say that in general, and we're generally looking at all now AU9, like just to clarify, actually, I have a quick slide that might help. I like pictures and it helps me imagine. Can I share real quick? I just want to maybe hammer in exactly what I meant by all that, and then kind of end with my ask real quick. Can I share screen? Cool. So this is a deck I presented during the Australia New Zealand town hall about a week ago. So what I'm saying is, the LoRa gateway in these regions, and initially we were thinking about Australia, New Zealand, but we're realizing that there's a very similar conflict in South America where there's a lot of AU915. And generally what we've come up with is a frequency plan that tolerates both frequency plans concurrently. So we don't have to upset established deployments with AU915, and we can allow AS9231 devices in these markets. So that, to us, that seems like a really nice win-win, where these early adopters who have deployed what was once upon a time recommended for their region don't get burned by this change. But then AS9231, as it's emerging as a pretty dominant frequency plan, it remains, we give access to, or the market now has access to these devices, which there's a lot more of. And so that's why we're developing a solution like this, and seeing whether it's going to work for those regions, essentially. So that's the, I can go more into it, but the main ask is, like, I would say in general, when we're thinking about AU915 regions, I think it'd be an interesting requirement again on that checklist to say, like, can you certify that you can also operate under AS9231?
But this requires a custom stack on both the AU915 and the AS923 devices, or no?
No. So what I'm trying to diagram here is actually the devices are just running one of the stacks. And actually, I can maybe jump into this real quick. So the channels that we've picked for the uplinks, and this is like fundamentally as the Helium network, this is the only thing we actually have to manage, because all of these gateways can pretty much transmit downlinks on arbitrary channels. There's some exceptions, but mostly that's true. So from at least a hardware perspective. So then what we've done is we've picked 8 channels that cover these join channels, which are the only 2 channels required by AS9231. But then it also, and then it gives us these other channels that are below the join channels, that, and all these channels align with channels 34 through 41 of AU915. So these are basically AU915 valid channels. These are AS9231 valid channels. And those are the only things we need to coordinate as a network. We did the specific configuration is different than what we right now call AS9231. Right now we're doing this on the right here. Because of the way that the Australian channel plan works, we're shifting it down here, which minimizes the interference with the downlinks. So that's the basic idea of this AS923 AU, AS923.1 AU, is that it's a channel plan that's dual compatible and also like maximizes the harmony between these 2 channel plans. Because if you did it like this other, the way that we're currently doing it, you'd actually have quite a bit of, you'd have this unnecessary conflict, and you wouldn't be using your spectrum as good as well as you could. And then just to just as a reminder of what AS9231 is, and I don't know how deep you guys go on the certifications, but like technically you can uplink and downlink, and specifically on the gateway side, you could downlink on like almost any channels that are within a pretty big range. I forget what it is in particular, but I think it's like 910 to 930 megahertz or something. It's in the LoRaWAN regional spec, but we want to make sure that as people are saying that I have an AS9231 certified device, that they've actually that they're not making any assumptions on what the downlink channels are, because they are quite configurable at a hardware, software, and protocol level. So those are things to keep in mind. And yeah, I don't want to deviate too much because I wasn't on the agenda, but I just wanted to raise these points, make sure you're aware of it, and reach out to me if you want to know more. And if
can you share this this PowerPoint with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I also have a write-up in Words that I'll make sure you get the deck and the write-up today.
Okay, and then just a question. So, I mean, definitely from a Helium Foundation perspective, this could be a unique Helium network compatible channel plan. Is there crossover to the LoRa Alliance on, changing their or modifying their existing channel plans as well, or would it only exist on the Helium network side of things?
Well, this is really just an interpretation of the spec more than anything. Like, this is within the LoRaWAN Alliance spec. Right. And we would do this in regions where AS9231 is supported by the Alliance already. So Australia is a perfect example where there's LoRaWAN Alliance certified devices for AU915 and AS9231. Right. So in that respect, like it's Australia is like a really good fit for this. But I don't know the South American countries too well, but I do know AU915 is very prevalent there. And as much as, and my understanding is many of them also have a similar situation where from a regulation standpoint, from the LoRaWAN Alliance's regional specification standpoint, both are considered valid.
Yep.
And in many cases, actually, I think that the Helium network might be lagging the regional specifications of the LoRaWAN Alliance, where I think there's at least 1 or 2 countries where they've said AS9231 is the one, and we're still lingering on AU915 just because of that's where it was before or something. So
So the equivalent of what you're doing is really like in the US, we use subband 2 of the US 915 LoRa channel plan. You're just specifying kind of the equivalent subbands of the existing channel plans that overlap. Is that a good way to understand?
precisely, yeah. Like we're in Australia, we're on subband 2.
Yep.
And this proposal puts us, it's technically between subband 4 and 5. So it's not
Right.
like the subbands are really, as far as I've seen, they're not actually mentioned in the spec. It's more of like a thing that people talk about from a convenience
That's right.
standpoint.
Yep.
So we're selecting 8 channels that are within the specification, and we've done it to try to maximize, like I think the thing to look at here is we've done it in a way to maximize the asymmetry of uplinks and downlinks, but we're stuck a little bit with the AU915 downlinks, which this channel has to, like, you can't move any of these channels. So the Australian side of this is 7/8 asymmetric, and then the AS9231 version is fully asymmetric and has enough distance that you could hope for full duplex as well. So that's what we've done there.
Cool.
But yeah, basically, like the entire design here and the entire proposal is intended to 100% be within the specification, and really just is a practical way of mitigating, the issue that AS9231 is getting a lot of momentum, but there's and a lot of people want to use it, but their countries and our current channel plan is exclusive and does not allow you to operate these AS9231 devices. So the design here is to make sure that the early adopters don't get burned, but also the market now has access to a lot more AS9231 devices, which we think is good for the ecosystem of LoRaWAN, but also obviously good for the Helium network as we get more traffic, hopefully, and more usage.
So Louis, summarizing, what would we as the committee do if we believed in this to help push it along? Is it, I wrote down simply, we should pose the question, can you certify right now that you can operate on both AS9231 and AU915 to all manufacturers currently seeking to sell in Australia? We just ask that question and say, please make certain you can. At a later date, we may change the channelization to fit somewhere within between those two.
I would extend that to saying any AU915 region. So a lot of these South American regions, I don't know how I don't know whether we've approved many hotspots specifically for South American countries, because I'm not really up to date on this on the actual like hotspot rollout that you guys have been doing. But generally, we think that we're going to run into this problem, or we're going to run into this this situation in a lot of places, and having this available to us will give us flexibility and being able to create resolution in a way that's a win-win for all parties, essentially. So to go back to what you were saying specifically, yeah, like I would say, are you want to, I don't know if Chile is a good example, but let's say Chile is AU915 primarily today. If you want to ship to Chile, we really would like you to also dual certify with AS9231. The main difference is the AS9231 downlinks, they could be on these frequencies and they are a different bandwidth than the Australian downlinks. And I know that that's an important thing that a lot of regulators specifically ask you to do, is show us what all of your potential transmits look like. So just make sure that you're also getting them to do more narrow transmits on other frequencies than the fixed Australian downlink frequencies. It would kind of be the summary, but again, I don't know where you guys are at and how deep you go into like reviewing the certification, but beyond, I mean, at the very least, suggest that they do this and recommend it. And then if you're actually reviewing certifications, just make sure that that they're transmitting out, on these AS9231 appropriate channels.
Yeah, that seems somewhat doable. In fact, we have a lot of processes in. Now for looking at testing reports, and we could just all I agree that part of the proposal process and our approval would be for these groups to make certain, hey, it's a little bit gray in these certain countries. Here's where we stand on what you need to test for. And we hope that this will work with everybody. And then it does leave flexibility later so that we can possibly.
Yeah, and that's one thing I'd like to
Well,
emphasize
they
too. This is not like, we're not saying that we're switching all these countries to these channel plans. It would behoove us to keep that option open because we're seeing this solution potentially be a really nice way of resolving some deployment problems we've had in Australia, where two parties want to do different things, and we have a solution to it, but we just need to make sure that the parts that are hard to change is like, how do you certify something after it's shipped, and what if for some reason the hardware doesn't allow you to do these things, because sometimes that happens too. So
okay, I think we've got a good summary of what we can do.
Just for final clarity, Lewis, so what is the current officially primary channel plan in Australia? Is it AU 1915 is the official one today?
yes, and it is specifically on these channels right here. So subband, if you index at 1, this would be subband 2. And the downlinks are fixed here, and they keep going up higher in the range as well. But the official frequency plan is AU 915. And just to be clear, like what the issue is AS 9231 is also a LoRaWAN Alliance, approved plan for Australia, but they can't use our network because we're on these uplink channels. So we have to do a channel plan that absorbs these join channels here. And this is what we're proposing, is essentially something that does that, which keeps AU 915. So we would still, currently the LoRaWAN committee's recommendation is still the notion that AS 9231 is the primary suggested, is the primary channel plan of the network. But what's come out over the last few weeks is clarifying that we're able to do this in a way that maintains AU 915 support. And I think that that's been actually, I think, the biggest issue with the communications initially was, there was not much mention of ongoing AU 915 support, but it's very clear that the community there has a significant amount of devices that they've either deployed or planning to deploy on AU 915. And as early adopters of both LoRaWAN and the network, we think that it's appropriate to do something to maintain that compatibility and make sure that they're able to keep going on with their plans and not be left with devices that can't join the network.
Yeah, so it sounds like we can do our part to help make certain that in the future this could be a solution by ensuring that the hardware that goes in Australia is capable of doing this.
Australia and all other AU 915 regions.
And all these other contested regions. Okay.
Because generally, like, we're just starting to see that this is probably not. I mean, the utility of having access to AS 9231 devices is probably universal. We're not sure yet, but just having options is important. So that's the main thing I wanted to do, was broadcast the idea that, I forget who I was working with back in September, but I know a lot of the vendors did find out through, I think, the MOC that we were trying to do, that we were looking for AS 9231 support in Australia. And I was really pleased when I was like, oh, did the message get out? And I talked to all of them, and they were pretty much all good to go. So, it might be standard practice to do that already. And maybe that was just luck, but anyway, just wanted to kind of reinforce that it's probably going to be an important tool.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I got a question on this. I'm the least technical person here. I know that I've talked to the Australians. The ones that I've talked to are about as vocal as a human can be about not wanting to change from 915. If I'm understanding this right, Lewis, what you just said is that they get to stay on 915. All their 915 devices are good. And then what it sounded like to me was that the manufacturers who want to buy or manufacture a bunch of these 923s also get to come in, and the 915s and 923s will end up being able to talk to each other? Or are they going to be two separate kind of sets that both operate on the same network but can't witness or beacon to each other?
Yeah, so the gateways would all be able to hear each other, because the way the beacons work is they send out a packet on one of the listen channels, and everyone's on the same listen channels. The only thing that's changed is so the gateways are listening to the same things, and basically, like, the Helium network, if you want to think about it in a very simple way, is like many LNSs can talk to the gateways. Many LoRaWAN network servers can talk to the gateways, And so, and then somehow the gateways know which LNS to route it to and stuff like that. And that I won't go into too much detail over that. Basically, when they see an AU915 device packet, they'll know to give it to that LNS, and same with AS9231. So you can, without too much crazy stuff in software, you basically can run these two channel plans concurrently. And I think that what you probably got wind of was when this was first announced. Up until 2 weeks ago, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on the fact that we could do something that was compatible for both sets of devices. And I think that that's we're very focused on making that clear and well tested too. And so far, like I've showed this plan to a lot of people that know the specification quite well, and no one's really said anything that they think wouldn't work yet. Obviously, we'll see when we actually implement it and roll it out. But from a specification standpoint, it does seem to be true that we could operate this no problem. What we are going to look at more so is, in reality, do the AU915 devices accept a new channel configuration gracefully, and how much friction is there going to be there? Because some of these stacks might be older, but as far as I've seen, like the channel mask commands used in AU915 are pretty old in the specification. So I'm pretty hopeful that most devices will have it. But then, there's always gonna be devices that are out of spec, and how bad is that going to be is my biggest question at this point in time.
Got it. Has Leo seen this thing? He's easily the most vocal of the Aussies.
Yeah, I've spoken to Leo a lot, and yeah, we spoke at the town hall. He's seen this. We've generally, I think people have come around to thinking that this is a nice way forward for everyone. I think there's a lot of a lot of justified skepticism of, I'd like to see it working before saying that I'm okay with it rolling out. But yeah, I think that we're definitely not going to roll it out without testing it. And from my perspective, having thought through it, like I'm pretty darn confident that we're within spec and that it works. And I've circulated to a lot of people who I think would have called it out as something being wrong if it was wrong. But that being said, there's still people looking at it, and we're still going to test it out and validate it before shipping it. And I'm pretty confident it's going to go well. But
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Doc.
Yeah.
you.
I think, Lewis, it might help us. We kind of need the list of those contested areas, those areas that we really would like to make certain that there's hardware mixing out there. Of course, Australia is one of them. You said there's others. We don't need to go through it here, but
I think if you went to
someone
H
can
plans and
remember
just
that.
clicked on AU915, you'd see the map basically. It's anyone that's
Okay.
running AU915.
Okay, so that makes it easy. So for us, I just think it's just us committing to our audit process and communicating with manufacturers. If you're in these regions, the audit is going to require that we, one of the things we do in the audit process is check the frequencies that you are proposing to use in your forwarder. We're going to want to make certain that your forwarder can at least handle both of these subplans, so that in future could possibly handle this hybrid.
Right.
The channelization I'm talking about specifically.
And just to clarify, the only thing that's different here, like technically on the listen side, there's nothing really weird. Like an AU915 device is able to do this. The only thing to really look at that's like the diff is you might transmit at bandwidths and channels that are not AU915. So that's really the only thing to look at from a certification standpoint. Like,
Okay.
are you, and some countries, they might not be able to go precisely on those transmit channels that we have mapped out, but the way that AS9231 works, the LNS can pretty much dynamically figure that out for every country. Not that our LNS does that yet, but we know that if we wanted to do AS9231 in Chile and they didn't let us use the channels that we're doing in Australia, we could just move those downlink channels to somewhere that is appropriate for Chile.
The short answer would be, can we as a mock make certain that manufacturers are building out railroad into areas that they're not engines going yet, but with a plan in the future?
Yeah.
I think we can. Is everyone okay? Just basically kind of formally saying we're going to make certain that our audit process, and this does cover our auditors, currently Sophie, always been Sophie, to add this additional check and communicate that's part of our requirements.
Yeah, I'll follow up with Lewis and Brad on the messaging.
Okay. Is everybody okay? Kind of adopting that? Are you officially voting here? I see officially from me, I have an okay. I've grabbed Nick and going to Sophie, Patrick, and Brad. Okay. Thank you. Great, Lewis. And I think we captured the LBT scheme.
Mhm.
That also really kind of covers the same thing. It has to do with the audit process, making certain that if we're going to approve for certain regions, that the testing and just the radio parts are tested for this, and the manufacturer does do that. And that is a big thing, by the way. Anybody who is not participating in mock, we really are working hard on updating how we watch manufacturers submit to and report their testing with the local authority. So it's right up the alley of stuff we're working on.
Well, thanks, guys. I'm
All
gonna
right.
duck out, but
Yeah, thanks.
feel free to reach out if you need any more information, and I'll make sure you get the write-up about this proposal as well, so you can read it at your leisure.
Is that the file you're going to show, is that public or is that not
It's public, yeah. I released it about 2 or 3 weeks ago, prior to the town hall, and then I presented the slides that you saw at the town hall with the Australians, and I'll share back both of these so that you can read them, And the write-up's nice because it goes in a lot more depth than I was able to in these couple minutes. And anyway, with that, I've taken enough of your time, and thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Lewis.
Thanks, Lewis.
Bye.
All right, okay, to move along here. Next thing, Brad, you've got something to explain about Kenya and auditing mining. Remember that?
No.
Totally. The deer in the headlights look.
Yeah, I wrote that based on the last call I was in with the manufacturer, but Brad is working with them and understands the application. And it seems that we are hearing from a growing number of manufacturers who want to deploy fleets for their own use. Just wanted to, maybe this is the first time or second time we talk about this, and how do we audit fleets that are already out in the world. I think, this comes back to your token lockup. Yep. But yeah, what are we thinking about this? And actually, Brad, what is this application? Can you talk to us about that?
The specific application in Kenya?
Yeah, or just in general, like an overview.
Well, just in general, just to maybe further describe the question at hand, right? And I would put it in, there's really two layers to it, in my opinion, right? Is there, if a company, whether it's a manufacturer or not, if a company comes and says they make a HIP-19 application for a customized hotspot capable of POC, and they do not plan to sell it through a retail channel, is that okay? And I think this has come up. There's been other companies maybe in the utility space or in the smart building space who said, hey, I want to embed a Helium gateway in this existing product, this existing system I have, and I need HIP-19 approval, but it's not going to be sold, to the average consumer. So I think first and foremost, just empirically, we should talk about, is that okay? Is there, is there anything that the MOC or the Helium Foundation would oppose there?
I can go through a couple things. I'm seeing this more clearly now. Let me speak to it. So, we have in our previous actions shown manufacturers that this is a dangerous area for them to get into, especially, we put them under kind of a lot of liability, saying if you're going to sell large numbers of hotspots to a single entity, you, the manufacturer, are very responsible for them, even if you may not be controlling them. And we've demonstrated that, right? There's a possibility, and the reason this is difficult is we only have one key in that situation shut off. We shut off the manufacturer, even if it turns out to be a big distributor who has been the problem. And we've tied those together. There could be a solution here that there's a modification to HIP-19, where if you want to become one of these major deployers, let's say, you have to first align with a previously approved HIP-19 manufacturer who's making the original equipment. And then you're doing a sub application to be a large deployer, not necessarily to the public, and you get a different onboarding key. You get control of an onboarding key. You're allowed onto the onboarding server. That way, if there's a problem later down the field, we shut off this deployer and not the original manufacturer. Is that kind of a solution you're thinking might work really well?
Yeah. So Jeremy, you kind of jumped to layer two, and I agree with you. I think this is where it's going. But just to add more color, let's take somebody who does some kind of smart building infrastructure equipment, right? They want to embed a Helium hotspot functionality into that building. It's really not something that they would ever sell to the general public, nor is it possible for them to go buy something with that integration from the traditional manufacturers that, you know, are selling boxes to retail, right? So I think there's a legitimate use case, you know, more on the business side, you know, where people want to integrate Helium hotspot functionality into existing industrial products, so forth and so on. And because of that company is manufacturing their own product for their own deployment. So I guess, you know, empirically, is there a problem with that, you know, just in terms of it being the people's network, or, you know, from that perspective? So I think that's just one question. The second part, which you jumped into, for, you know, can we as the MOC, you know, with the responsibility to look at people not gaming, you know, can we administer that? Do we have visibility into that scenario to make sure that people don't abuse that privilege? To your point, it's actually easier if we give them their own onboarding key. Because if we give them their own onboarding key, it makes it super easy to go do the analytics on the data and look at, you know, are these things really in where they should be, or are they just a gaming farm, right? So I think the technical, you know, kind of capability to for oversight, that's the easy answer, because if we give them their own onboarding key, it makes it very easy to see their fleet. But we didn't really maybe get everybody to comment on the first part of the question was, is this okay, right? Is this from the foundations and the people's network perspective? Is this a use case that, you know, that should be allowed, and so forth and so on?
Yeah, I think it's a great discussion. I'll jump right in. Thanks for clarifying that, and I agree. Don't necessarily have to jump to step two. Really answering question one. I'll speak on both sides of what's occurred to me as I've thought through this a lot before. And I don't know if anybody else has been involved with other blockchains, but in any blockchain, there's always a point in time where really gets its power from being the most distributed across the most number of actors, separate actors as possible. That way, no one actor has any large control. We call these Sybil attacks in cases where, you know, like if something like Bitcoin, which is proof of work, in the proof of work system, anybody who controls technically 51% of the network or more can mount a Sybil attack and kind of go around some of the proof of work, proof of whatever coverage. And in Helium, there's a similar thing here. You know, one of the dangers that we really want to prevent is any one entity, any one owner entity, which is very hard for us to see, from owning a lot of hotspots. Because when they do, it's a real pressure, economic incentive for you to use your power to have those hotspots just talk to each other. You know, because you're the one being rewarding in all the transactions, there's no incentive for you to go cooperate with others in your area, your asserted area. And this is, to me, one of the big reasons why it is worth thinking about how do we handle this idea that, you know, ultimately, I think this network gets a lot of its power from there being a lot of hotspots owned by many different people because of this danger. But if there's a way to prevent this danger, in some cases, I think maybe it could be a powerful tool.
Is there a way to do multiple keys per manufacturer and assign like a license fee to each key? So maybe every 10,000 hotspots, you have to do an expedited reapplication process?
Well, that's kind of straight into H&T vendor lockup. Yeah, but technically there kind of is.
But coming back to again, this empirical question, Jeremy, I mean, I think you articulated the value of diversity in participants as a way of security. So but you never really addressed this question of, you know, if large businesses want to deploy large fleets in all of their restaurants, hotels, whatever it may be, is that inherently okay? I mean, on one hand,
yeah,
I would frame it as,
I was not answering the question. I was showing the pros and cons. And there's definitely pros in having large businesses who can deploy lots of hotspots legitimately. That will rapidly expand network coverage, which is something I think everyone in this group understands is our role as participants in this, people who love the network. So we want. There's just a danger associated with it. And I want to get at you know, I think it could be done with some technical solutions, and maybe that's what we're here to talk about. I don't want to shoot it down or say, oh yeah, it absolutely should be done. I just want to represent the conflicts on both sides.
I'm a yes for
Go ahead,
later
keep
one. Yeah, they
debating
should
the
definitely be
merits.
allowed to do it. We just got to figure out how to make it safe for the network.
Yeah, I mean,
see now here. Yeah.
The empirical argument is it's a decentralized network, just like Bitcoin. Anybody can participate in Bitcoin. Everybody, you know, businesses and individuals everybody should be able to participate and use the network to really become a ubiquitous IoT network, right? I mean, so, does anybody else have a comment on that first layer? Are we all agreed, like there's no barrier to businesses coming in and deploying and so forth, as long as they're not gaming?
Well, there just is one, which is the public perception really has the tagline, the people's network, really says one thing. And if we go down this road, we have to agree that all right, if I'm a manufacturer, I can deploy lots of them, I don't have to sell them to customers. People will fight against that wording, and it's a serious issue that I want to talk to. And
Another issue, we've been looking at more recently manufacturers coming in from the very beginning and looking at their backgrounds. So some of the manufacturers that we've talked to who are doing their own fleets have backgrounds in Filecoin and Bitcoin and so on. So we would need to take that into account. I mean, they're mining companies. That's their interest, is mining. And so mining and network coverage together, but as the mock, we would need to really fully understand that rather than just being like, okay, go ahead, Brad.
No, well, it's perfect. So, because this is the discussion I was trying to hopefully get people to talk about. So it's okay if, right, the company that wants to do this is doing it as a part of a legitimate network coverage use case expansion, whether it can even be 5G in the future or IoT for now. But if a company wants to do this and it's not clear that they have that deployment, that companion product synergy,
right.
then the MOC may say no, because you haven't convinced us that you're deploying this in a legitimate use to expand the network and solve a problem, right?
Love it. Yeah. So can we do something where, like, if you want to have a sole deployment, sole customer deployment, whatever hotspot, you're only deployed to you, is you have to also prove in the application, I think this is what you're saying, that maybe that you have the rights to the location and you have to do what I'm calling like a network deployment plan. So if you want to be the only person, or if you want to be the sole manufacturer for yourself, like, okay, show us the 20,000 locations you're going to put these 20,000 hotspots you want to make. If you don't have the rights to those, or if you don't have some operating agreement or something, then no, you can't make your own. I think that seems to protect it. We also got to talk to people in marketing about this people's network shit, because that's just going to bite us in the ass.
Well, it's the people's. I mean, but it doesn't mean that I mean, people work at businesses too. Yeah. Right. I mean, all of our lives are a combination of businesses doing things for us. Like we can't be I mean, this is my personal opinion. It needs to be an equal access network to individuals and businesses. Yep. And as long as businesses are trying to deploy in a way to expand the network, solve a problem, it shouldn't be blocked. But to Sophie's point, if it's a company that comes in and just says, we want to build 100,000 miners and they don't have any synergy for deployment or solving a problem, that the MOC may not approve it.
But what if they have both? They have a background in mining. They see an opportunity to grow the network in an area of low coverage. I mean, if I was a manufacturer, that's what I would do. You would want to cover an area that has low coverage, get as much rewards as you can, and you become, and your motivation is not just coverage, but
all the motivations. I mean, as long as they can show that they have the ability to deploy those things physically in different areas, I don't see anything wrong with it. And it seems to me pretty straightforward that, hey, if you want to deploy 20,000 and you don't have 20,000 locations, no, you can't do it. And you have to have proof of those locations, in the same way that we're going to expect you
point. Yeah, which is, why is this an issue? What are the barriers right now that are preventing this from happening?
We're just discussing it because it's coming up more.
I think we're having more new applicants to the HIP-19 come in with a dedicated deployment strategy versus, hey, I'm going to go plan to sell this.
Yep.
Right?
Okay, so it's our policy that we're trying to push right now that's actually kind of getting in the way of this.
Well, it's been something I think there's never been a stated policy by the committee, because this situation hasn't occurred in the past, and definitely in the early days of HIP-19, I think there was a bias towards, hey, these gateways need to be made available for sale to the broad community, right? But
I mean, yeah, well, you have questions on that application. How are you going to do OTA updates? How is your customer service going to work? How are you going to support these, right? Those maybe are the questions that are actually not relevant in some of these cases.
Right.
Well,
we-
and then just kind of skipping the second layer, by giving these fleet deployers their own onboarding key, it seems to me it makes it much easier to monitor their behavior, make sure the deployments match what they said they were going to do. And just like the other folks who have had their keys revoked and their units added to the deny list, if there's misbehavior from what the stated intent was and legitimate deployment, then obviously it's easier to go to go remedy that in these scenarios.
Yeah, it sounds
But
like-
Sophie, I mean, my threshold is as long as you're not, if you're going to go deploy 1,000 hotspots in a physical region and provide coverage there, that there's nothing wrong with
That's
that.
great. No, I agree. I think that's great. I just, I'm more like just, talking this through. This
Oh,
is,
yeah, we are.
the first time that I'm really thinking. Thanks for those slides, by the way. Those were great. So how does the mock prove to ourselves that a company is legitimately, just because they give us a bunch of locations or a network, what did you call it, Nick? A network deployment plan?
Yeah.
Just, I love it. That sounds so like legit.
So official, yeah.
How do we evaluate that? I mean, we don't have to decide that now on this call, but these are questions like how we've already had a lot of, the reason we have gaming is because some manufacturers don't, they don't see the value of the network the same way that others do.
Yep.
Some,
I mean, I'm going through this process of getting Gristle King a institutional crypto trading account, right? So I can do something with the HNT. And one of the things Binance is asking is like for all the mining location agreements that I have, because they want to see that. And I think we could ask for the same thing. And basically the decision tree would kind of bifurcate super early. Are you going to do retail or are you going to do institution or whatever dedicated, or maybe both? If it's dedicated, if there's any dedicated in there, if it's just that or dedicated in, is that they have to fill out a separate piece that where they do submit all of their location agreements. And that's part of it. Like, hey, if you want the extra benefit, then you have to do the extra lift.
Mhm.
And then I'm really curious about how many can we limit the number of hotspots that get onboarded and say, look, we'll give you like a 500 hotspot key, and then you have to wait 2 months before you deploy 500 more, so that we can see you're not gaming for those 2 months. In the same way, whatever this HIP is that's doing the kind of slow onboard for hotspots, that same kind of thing, but at a manufacturer's scale. I think we got to be really careful about protecting the network. Yeah, from institutional gamers.
Mhm. I like that 500 first, but I mean, 2 months is not very long. I mean,
Yeah, like whatever the numbers are, if it's 1,000 or 200 or whatever, like we kind of figure out, have some get StarWatch or some math guy to figure that out.
Yeah.
Well,
There
also
are technical solutions that could do this. Controlling their onboarding key technically with the onboarding server, which is already done, can have very magical things like this happen. I just want to speak on the other side of who's going to code this, who's going to have the time to review this. If any of you have ever put the burden on yourselves having to do a large batch processing thing of anything with these guys, just warn you that it's easy to, as an example, adopt an internal HIP without code. I'm worried more about how to make it technically possible if we really do want to add these little extra checkpoints on here, make ourselves and the rest of the community feel safer. How could we realistically do it?
Well, two things, and I don't know if we're going to talk about the token lock idea, because obviously that puts.
We're supposed to, actually. We probably should do it
yeah,
next.
and we actually have a call with a vendor in 10 minutes.
15 minutes? Yeah.
Yeah,
10
and
minutes.
so we actually need to
It was my fault for letting us go a little bit long on some of the other things. So, I think, how about this? We've all talked a lot about this more, I think more than any before. I'm glad, Brad, you've been able to really bring it up, because I know it's been sitting in your mind for quite a while. So I don't think we have to come to a conclusion about it now, but let's commit to really talking about this issue. I think, we're all somewhat in agreement that it's something to think about, and it really can be a benefit to the network, but we're all a little worried on some things here or there, rather than dealing the other parts of
Yeah,
discussion.
I do want to say one thing though, the manual thing that you were talking about, I like just any sort of manual type of going through of information that could potentially be rolled into a fee for a manufacturer that's doing
Sure.
like
Yeah.
that. So I think would be probably the most straightforward way to approach that.
And in fact, maybe having the vendor lockup thing be mandatory for the first of these, or for all of these would be the first attempt to really look at this, and having community control of that agency is a way of possibly compensating anything that does go wrong. Really want there to be consequences so that everyone's aligned, and this is a chance to be more involved too with the maker and the deployments, but it does come with management on our end in one way or another. So yeah, I'm tentatively cool with it, but we're gonna have to discuss it more. I like to think about how the roles of it would work. If everyone's cool to move on. Yeah. All right. So is everybody looking here? What do you think we should go on to next? We sort of have this thing about should we go further into Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, LE? We had some complaints by other manufacturers policing other manufacturers saying, hey, how did you let them through? They didn't get their Bluetooth low energy certification. Another thing is, should we talk about, internally we've had stricter requirements for people joining, for manufacturers joining. I do want to help illustrate to the public, what our thinking has been, because there have been more denials on that people have been applied for. Should we talk about that publicly, about what we're trying to do?
So I'll make a comment on the Wi-Fi BLE.
Sure.
Again, I think it comes down to the scope and mandate of the MOC. We are not reviewing BLE, Wi-Fi, other radio cellular certifications, because those radio protocols are not germane to the Helium Long-Fi protocol. Right. So the only reason we're looking at the LoRa certifications is because it is kind of the radio part that is specific to the Helium network, and we feel like that makes sense. But we're not going to go review every radio certification for every manufacturer. Again, that comes back to, we're not the good housekeeping seal of approval. All the manufacturers are responsible for all of the radio certifications for their products. Like we are not an official. We're doing it as a courtesy, right? Just to make sure that at least the manufacturers are looking at the right LoRa frequencies, right modulations, as we talked about before.
Okay. Well, so I did make a public comment to Tim, Long AP, saying, hey, thanks for bringing this to our attention. We are working on tightening our regulatory things part in here. I actually do like the approach, because it does explain really why we didn't do this in the past.
I mean, unless we staff up, we just don't have the bandwidth to be the good housekeeping seal of approval for every product.
Yeah.
Is everyone kind of okay?
I agree with Brad. No, totally 100%. We just, that's not our job. And
we do the testing because we want to make certain that the radio will work for what it's supposed to do for Helium.
Exactly. And if another vendor has a problem with another vendor's certification, then they can complain to the FCC or, whatever. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's a very good summary. Cool. I think this doesn't necessarily require a vote, because this ultimately comes down to what we do during our regular approval process. But if everyone understands at least the message there.
Yeah, I think, Sophie, we could update the documentation and just be clear to everybody, right? Manufacturers overall are responsible for their own certifications. Let's be clear. The MOC is only going to review the LoRa, ones at this time, maybe with 5G that would expand somehow. But we're not going to do BLE, Wi-Fi, other cellular backhaul. It's outside of our scope. Just so everybody knows that they're still responsible for it.
Yes, I will update the documentation.
Okay. So the next item on here says stricter criteria for manufacturers wanting to join or additional guidelines of what is required, network deployment. So we a little bit touched on this in the last topic. Does anybody know who wrote this and what sort of actions you'd like us to do?
It was me, and we kind of already discussed a little about it. I think that some of that can probably also be further discussed offline, just in the interest of time. But yeah, it kind of just goes along with the vendor lockup and what we were kind of already talking about, and just having more of maybe like a checklist of of what the criteria is the mock is really looking for. There's kind of already a statement out there, but just to clarify all of that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we can come up with more clarifications. We did have our own sort of internal gut check change of what we were working on or approving, right? When I sort of said, hey, I'm going to be stricter about who I'm approving. We had added that extra step right in the after KIC or before KYC.
I didn't get that. Could you?
Where, hey, I'm going to be, it gives an opportunity for us to say no before someone invests a heck of a lot of resources in. When we say, look, even after you doing your work, we're really not comfortable with you. So that's why we've been doing some of that. And okay, to just table that and say, let's continue to discuss that and maybe working into more docs. We have 5 minutes left. Should we talk about H&T lockup, just the status really? So Sophie had, I had been on the task to finish this up. I have been so horribly laggy about it. Sophie jumped in and has volunteered to help push me through this. We're going to be working on that later today, this afternoon, on a little working
All
session.
welcome. I mean,
Yeah,
and-
everyone's welcome.
Yeah. So
But big thank you, Sophie, for helping to push this one forward. And I think it's an important one. I'd really like it, all of us as a mock, to kind of sign on to be the authors, or at least to be the presenters of it as a formal HIP. So I don't think there's else to be done with that, technically, no.
No, like the big question is like, how much do they lock up, right? Like that's the huge.
There's questions how much they lock up, technical things about where do they lock it up. One proposal is the wallet that's controlled by the mock. That scares the crud out of me. I don't want to be holding anyone's HT. So those are little sticky points that maybe someone else can help come with the technical things.
yeah, I mean, I think we can also, as we're going through it. I mean, Jeremy mostly wrote it, and I mean, it's mostly all there, but
yeah, but it's all up in the air, and it just needs to be worked. And I just welcome everyone's input, and again, thanking everyone.
But we also may come out of this. What I think we'll come out with is a full document, and then we'll have like a bullet point of maybe 5 questions.
Yeah,
and that perhaps we can all discuss as a group.
True.
Any last pressing issues? Things that we didn't talk about that were super important?
I think we're good.
Yeah.
All right.
4 minutes to stay.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
All right, and we'll see you soon.
Right on.